Nations rage, and the peoples imagine a vain thing. The kings of the earth set themselves, and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord and against his Christ.
So we have got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of organizations that are working, in a sense, networking with each other to bring about a religious philosophy that will ultimately usher in the Antichrist.
So when the Bible talks about the man of lawlessness, a one world government, a one world religion, you can bank on it.
World government has been declared by some of the greatest leaders and influential minds of the last century. The focus of their desire is supposedly world peace. Albert Einstein said, mankind's desire for peace can be realized only by the creation of a world government. Einstein also declared, quote, there is no salvation for civilization or even the human race other than the creation of a world government. Meanwhile, Nehru, the leader of India during the days of Mahatma Gandhi, declared, I have long believed the only way peace can be achieved is through world government. We have arrived at a stage where the next step must comprise a world and all its states submitting to the authority of world organization. Mortimer Adler said, world peace is impossible without world government. And Sir Winston Churchill declared, the creation of an authoritative world order is the ultimate aim toward which we must strive. French President Charles de Gaulle seemed adamant when he said, nations must unite in a world government or perish. Walter Cronkite said concerning nuclear devastation that, quote, if we are to avoid that catastrophe, a system of world order, preferably a system of world government, is mandatory. The proud nations someday will see the light, and for the common good and their own survival, yield up their precious sovereignty, just as America's 13 colonies did 2 centuries ago. In 1992, Strobe Talbot, President Clinton's Deputy Secretary of State, was quoted in Time magazine saying, in the next century, nations as we know it will be obsolete. All states will recognize a single global authority. National sovereignty wasn't such a great idea after all. In December 2001, Edward Whitmer, the president of the Illinois Division of the United Nations Association of the United States, said, quote, within 10 years' time, you're going to see the beginning of an embryonic world order. Britain's Prime Minister Tony Blair said, quote, globalization has transformed our economies and our working practices. It is a political and security phenomenon. We are all internationalists now, whether we like it or not. We are witnessing the beginnings of a new doctrine of international community. While the quote that seems to consolidate them all comes from Robert Mueller, former Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations, who said, we must move as quickly as possible to a one-world government, a one-world religion, under a one-world leader. As to what manner of leadership is under consideration, consider this quote from Paul Henry Spaak, the former Secretary General of NATO, who in 1957 said, what we want is a man of sufficient stature to hold the allegiance of the people and to lift us out of the economic morass into which we are sinking. Send us such a man, and be he God or the devil, we will receive him. Late in the 18th century, a group known as the Jacobins, who brought about the French Revolution, said they were seeking to establish what they called a universal republic or a new world order. That very phrase has come to represent the entire march toward world government, the coming last day empire, spoken of by the highest offices in all the world. Robert Kennedy, the former U.S. Attorney General in 1967, said, all of us will ultimately be judged on the effort we have contributed to building a new world order. In October 1967, Richard Nixon was quoted in Foreign Affairs saying, the developing coherence of Asian regional thinking is to evolve regional approaches to development needs and to the evolution of a new world World Order. A few years later, the New York Times reported that Nixon spoke of the talks as a beginning, merely reiterating the belief he brought to China that both nations share an interest in peace and building a new world order. On July 26, 1968, the Associated Press reported that New York Governor Nelson A. Rockefeller says as president he would work toward international creation of a new world order. In 1976, a new document surfaced that was called the Declaration of Interdependence. It was signed by 32 U.S. senators and 92 representatives in Washington, D.C. It read, in part, 2 centuries ago, our forefathers brought forth a new nation. Now we must join with others to bring forth a new world order. And Henry Kissinger, in an address before the United Nations in 1975, said, "So we say to all peoples and governments, let us fashion together a new world order." In 1994, Kissinger stated that the New World Order cannot happen without U.S. participation, as we are the most significant single component. Yes, there will be a New World Order, and it will force the United States to change its perceptions. This New World Order goal is supposedly for the good of all mankind, as Nelson Mandela affirmed in the Philadelphia Inquirer in October of 1994, when he said, "The New World Order that is in the making must focus on the creation of a world of democracy, peace, and prosperity for all." Democratic leader Richard Gephardt in the Wall Street Journal said, "We can see beyond the present shadows of war in the Middle East to a new world order where the strong work together to deter and stop aggression." This was precisely Franklin Roosevelt's and Winston Churchill's vision for peace for the post-war period. Even President Mubarak of Egypt is quoted in the New York Times saying that the renewal of the Non-Proliferation Treaty was described as important, quote, "for the welfare of the whole world and the New World Order." Also, before the United Nations in 1979, Cuban dictator Fidel Castro said, "We must establish a new world order based on justice, on equity, and on peace." Mikhail Gorbachev, the former leader of the Soviet Union, made this rather disturbing association when he said, "We are moving toward a new world order, the world of communism. We shall never turn off that road." Perhaps most troubling of all is this quote from Adolf Hitler during the Second World War, who said, "National Socialism will use its own revolution for the establishing of a new world order." Such disturbing statements about the New World Order are not confined to Hitler. Historian Walter Mills, writing about World War I, described the efforts of Colonel Mandell House, the chief advisor to President Wilson, speaking of his hidden motive for involving America in the war. He wrote, "The colonel's sole justification for preparing such a batch of blood for his countrymen was his hope of establishing a new world order of peace and security." The Bible says, "The day of the Lord will come just like a thief in the night. For while they are saying peace and security, then destruction will come upon them suddenly, like labor pains upon a woman with child, and they will not escape." The labor pains or birth pangs a woman suffers during childbirth come suddenly, but not all at once. The contractions are usually spread apart at first and can continue for many hours. But as the labor reaches its climax, the contractions quicken until they come one right after another. This is the picture given in the Bible of how catastrophic events will progress as the day of the Lord approaches. The starting gun for these contractions seems to be the cry of peace and security, as we saw with Colonel House and the First World War. In fact, during World War I, Nicholas Murray Butler, who ironically would win the Nobel Prize for Peace, gave this mysterious address before the Union League of Philadelphia on November 27, 1915. He said, "The old world order died with the setting of that day's sun, and a new world order is being born while I speak, with birth pangs so terrible that it seems almost incredible that life could come out of such fearful suffering and such overwhelming sorrow." An estimated 16 million lives were lost during World War I. But the conflict to come would make the Great War pale by comparison. While the numbers vary, it is now estimated that some 50 million lives were lost as a result of World War II, a birth pang which began with a similar declaration of peace for the sake of security. British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain met with Adolf Hitler in 1938 to draft the Munich Accord for the purpose of supposedly providing security for Czechoslovakia and to assure the peace of Europe. Chamberlain arrived back in London with this historic announcement.
This morning, I had another talk with the German Chancellor, Herr Hitler. And here is the paper which bears his name upon it as well as mine. We regard the agreement signed last night and the Anglo-German naval agreement as symbolic of the desire of our two peoples never to go to war with one another again.
"I believe it is peace for our time," he said. "Go home and get a nice quiet sleep." So confident were the British, they posted signs saying, "Don't mind Hitler, take your holiday." 6 months later, Hitler violated the agreement when the Nazis invaded Czechoslovakia. In less than a year, World War II was officially underway. Chamberlain's declaration of peace is today considered one of the greatest blunders of the 20th century. Can these events have been a foreshadowing of things to come? You be the judge as you consider this speech given by President George Bush Sr. when he spoke of the New World Order before the United States Congress in 1991.
A new world order where diverse nations are drawn together in common cause to achieve the universal aspirations of mankind: peace and security, peace and security, freedom, and the rule of law.
Some find it interesting that President Bush made this declaration on September the 11th, 1991, exactly 10 years prior to the destructive attack on America. But Bush had spoken of the New World Order a year before. Concerning the crisis in the Persian Gulf, he said, "Out of these troubled times, a new world order can emerge." These words he spoke on September the 11th, 1990, 11 years prior to America's tragedy. Can all these things be merely coincidence? And why would world government and a desire for peace and security bring about destruction? Jesus said, "My peace I give unto you, not as the world gives, give I unto you." Can it be that the world peace pursued by kings and rulers is somehow contrary to the peace of Christ? James Warburg of the Council on Foreign Relations, while speaking to the Senate Foreign Relations Committee on February 17, 1950, said, "We shall have world government whether or not we like it. The question is only whether world government will be achieved by consent or by conquest." An early warning against the tone of this movement was sounded by Congressman Larry P. McDonald, who even named some of those he deemed responsible when he said, "The drive of the Rockefellers and their allies is to create a one-world government, combining supercapitalism and communism under the same tent, all under their control. Do I mean conspiracy? Yes, I do. I am convinced there is such a plot, international in scope, generations old in planning, and incredibly evil in intent." Arthur Schlesinger Jr. in the July-August 1995 issue of Foreign Affairs said, "We are not going to achieve a new world order without paying for it in blood as well as words and money." Decades earlier, famed author H.G. Wells, who wrote such works as The Time Machine and The Invisible Man, was also a member of a controversial group known as the Fabian Socialist Society. While his science fiction books are well known, Wells also wrote a little-known work titled The New World Order, published in 1939. In it he states, "Countless people will hate the New World Order and will die protesting against it. When we attempt to evaluate its promise, we have to bear in mind the distress of a generation or so of malcontents, many of them quite gallant and graceful-looking people." So affected was he by his research on the subject that author Ralph Epperson compared the New World Order to George Orwell's 1984. He said, "It might have been George Orwell in his book 1984 that best summarized what the New World Order had in store for the world when he wrote, 'If you want a picture of the future, imagine a boot stamping on a human face forever.'" Thankfully, the Bible tells us that the tribulation brought about by this New World Order empire will not last forever, but the Lord himself will intervene on behalf of those who put faith in him. But before that hour comes, Jesus said that the world would suffer affliction worse than any it has ever before seen. Jesus said that everyone who does evil hates the light and does not come into the light for fear that his deeds will be exposed. Many believe that the drive for a new world order is a secret operation, and that those who are aware of its true intent know full well that what they are planning is a kingdom of evil. 7 days before his tragic assassination, President John F. Kennedy is alleged to have said, "There exists in this country a plot to enslave every man, woman, and child. Before I leave this high and noble office, I intend to expose this plot." But Kennedy was not the first to speak of such things. John F. Hyland, the mayor of New York from 1918 to 1925, said, "The real menace of our republic is the invisible government, which like a giant octopus sprawls its slimy length over our city, state, and nation." World War II General Douglas MacArthur said, "I am concerned for the security of our great nation, not so much because of any threat from without, but because of the insidious forces working from within." Supreme Court Justice Felix Frankfurter is quoted saying, "The real rulers in Washington are invisible and exercise their power from behind the scenes." Even President Woodrow Wilson supported such claims. Today, the White House website reports that Wilson, quote, "asserted international leadership in building a new world order." However, in 1913, Wilson wrote these words in a work titled The New Freedom. He said, "Some of the biggest men in the United States are afraid of something. They know that there is a power somewhere so organized, so subtle, so watchful, so interlocked, so complete, so pervasive, that they had better not speak above their breath when they speak in condemnation of it." But is this secret power only at work in America? A century earlier, English Prime Minister Benjamin Disraeli wrote, "The world is governed by very different personages from what is imagined by those who are not behind the scenes." Disraeli warned of a worldwide conspiracy in 1876 when he said, "The governments of the present day have to deal not merely with other governments, with emperors, kings, and ministers, but also with the secret societies, which have everywhere their unscrupulous agents and can, at the last moment, upset all the government's plans."